The show is about to begin.
Ken Peters had worked as a trainer for 11 years, but he never expected to be attacked during his career at SeaWorld. As the female orca, Kasatka, dragged him under, he couldn't stop thinking that this was how his life would end. The orca continued toying with him, thrashing him around in the water and dragging him to the bottom of the pool 3 times. People watched in horror as the agitated whale attacked him. Ken desperately tried to escape, but Kasatka would not let go. With only fractions of a second left before Ken would lose his life, an idea suddenly emerged, one that would soon become his lifeline. Since the first orca named Shamu performed at SeaWorld San Diego in 1960, there has never been a year without an incident. The marine park, famous for its killer whale performances in Orlando and San Diego, has often been criticized for the deadly risk they pose to humans, but the park went ahead anyway. These were almost 22-foot-long, 5,000-pound animals captured brutally from their environment, the vast expanses of the ocean, to live in tiny tanks, which often took a toll on their mental health. However, it was a problem that the authorities and trainers just didn't care to acknowledge. The success and thrill of the amazing orca performances were echoed every time by the fascinated crowds yelling "Shamu" in an ironic salute to an animal who despised being there. Ken Peters had been trained well, and his experience had paid off on November 29, 2006. There had been countless incidents involving the female orca, Kasatka. She had bumped, bitten, battered, and dragged people into her pool, but her attack on Ken Peters was unimaginable. Even though SeaWorld had witnessed orca attacks in the past, it was nothing new. Kasatka, for all her tantrums, was never expected to go that far, but something had agitated the orca at that very moment, causing her to lose it and ravage Ken Peters.
The public saw the video, the full video, and it was way more dramatic than I had been led to believe.
Kasatka was not just the star of SeaWorld San Diego, she was the matriarch of the marine park. Kasatka was the first captive killer whale to conceive from artificial insemination, giving birth to almost 11 babies in captivity. Now that makes her a celebrity, but just like Tilikum, a notorious rebel orca who often made headlines with his aggression, Kasatka was no less. Kasatka was captured off the coast of Iceland on October 26, 1978. She was a young 2-year-old female, swimming happily with friend Kahana when both were ambushed and housed in a sea pen in Grindavik. Within a few months, Kasatka was sold to SeaWorld, where she was made to live in training captivity. While Kasatka went through her training routines well enough to be turned into a performing whale, she was not very happy there. And when you are taken from an environment with endless water and made to live in a tiny little tank just a little bit bigger than you, mental trauma and frustration will set in. The first warning signs of Kasatka's aggression manifested in 1993, and ironically, it was Ken Peters who she chose as her first victim. Kasatka tried tearing into Peters. While orcas may not possess the razor-sharp teeth of sharks, they remain fully capable of wreaking brutal and catastrophic havoc. Luckily, Peters got away, and as incredible and astonishing as it sounds, Kasatka again tried biting Peters in 1999. Now, what was going on? Here was this gigantic whale who seemed to have formed a bond with one of the most experienced trainers in SeaWorld. She performed well with Peters in the water, and both were veterans of the marine park. Did Kasatka see Peter as nothing more than a plaything, or maybe a potential prey? Orcas have this sadistic habit of toying with their game in the water. They will toss around dolphins, seals, and even sharks, playing water rugby with them. Besides Peters, there were other incidents involving Kasatka, but Peters was clearly her favorite, whom she had constantly been trying to have a go at. On November 30th, 2006, Kasatka got her chance and took it. It was a fabulous sunny day at SeaWorld San Diego, and as usual, there were packed crowds. Ken Peters was getting ready for his performance with Kasatka. The female orca was on her best behavior, or was it all an act where she had something sinister going on in her mind? Peters was getting Kasatka ready. He had signaled her to come onto the pool surface, as was the traditional entry, while another trainer stood at the side clapping and pepping up the crowd. Peters hugged Katsuka, after which the whale just side splashed into the water. She looked like she was truly enjoying herself, and Peters did too. The whale then bobbed out of the water and gave Peters the nose greeting, and frankly, from the perspective of an audience, that looked adorable. It was then Peters' turn to get into the water, and he dove into the pool. Ken Peters might have been the oldest trainer in SeaWorld, but he loved his job. He was enthusiastic about every performance. Despite having been attacked in the past by Katsuka, he never harbored a grudge and regarded it as just a whale having an off day. Peters submerged below the surface, ready to perform the favorite stunt enjoyed by trainers, and that was to emerge from the water, standing on the whale's snout. It thrilled the crowd as well. Something went wrong though. Where was Peters? As Peters disappeared into the pool, trainers on the edge waited anxiously to see him surface, but he did not. After a minute or so, there was a brief hint and a sigh of relief as they saw the large black shadow of Katsuka rising. But then something terrifying happened. Katsuka did not emerge entirely and instead, like a crocodile, spiraled into a death row, thrashing Peters as she did so. At that moment, Peters was briefly taken aback by what was happening. Why did Katsuka throw him over? Before he could recompose himself, Katsuka grabbed Peters by the foot and tossed him around briefly before submerging again. By now, more trainers had gathered onto the pool's edge. Some were terrified. There have been several incidents of unpredictable orca behavior in SeaWorld branches across the country, most at Orlando and SeaWorld. Just 8 years ago, a young trainer, Kelty Byrne, was killed by Nuka 4, a male orca at Sealand on the Pacific of Victoria, British Columbia. Katsuka too had known to attack trainers, had she finally gone over the edge. It was an agonizing 30-second wait with the people just watching the swirling water, not knowing what was happening with Peters in the pool. Horrifying underwater video footage revealed how Katsuka had Peters' foot in her mouth. She kept dragging him around, and if it continued for longer, Peters would not have survived. There is no way of knowing how long a trainer can withstand such trauma underwater. Fortunately, Katsuka resurfaced, and Peters was seen doing the unthinkable. He was rubbing the orca's back and trying to calm the killer whale down, despite being injured. Katsuka just wouldn't give up on Peters, who was dragged down again a couple more times. Finally, when Katsuka let go, Peters made a dash to swim for his life. Katsuka, enraged, possibly at his escape, followed him. She was not done with Peters, and knowing an orca, playthings usually end up in a kill. It was Peters' only chance, and he took it. As unbearable as it was, his foot bleeding, his body bitten, he swam possibly the fastest swim of his life. Luckily, Katsuka was obstructed by several buoys thrown in the water by trainers trying to distract her. Peters made it and was quickly pulled onto the edge of the pool by the others. After reaching safety, his body gave way and he just collapsed on the wet tiles out of exhaustion. Thankfully, Peters was not severely injured. His foot was broken and there were teeth marks on various parts of his body.
A SeaWorld trainer is recovering today.